What are you looking at the next year or two? I mean, are there certain industries or certain companies that you find exciting and that you write about?
Well, I suppose it would be back to Africa. You know, if I was a single guy, I would definitely be living there. You know, doing something or other. You know, but the fact is, I've got my eye open when I see these companies, and I'm not like an aid guy or a philanthropic guy. But like being out supporting those companies on their way up is of great happiness to me. So I suppose that's my focus, really. I was in Palestine a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, what was that?
I want to talk about the Middle East because that's the other region you've done quite a bit in.
Because we hear about Israel a lot, obviously, tons of startups there, tons of exits there as well. I don't know anything about the Palestinian industry.
Well, I mean, it's a very tricky subject, right? I was on kibbutzim when I was in my early 20s. I've been all over Israel, from the Golan Heights to Eilat, and worked and had my passport nicked and worked on bad places on the West Bank. I remember I worked on this place, this Mashable, which is a cooperative farm. It was something like 16 cents an hour, and there was a right-wing Jewish settler, Algerian guy, who was my farmer, and my politics, probably similar now as they were then, was for me to despise him. You know what I mean? He was stealing the land from the Palestinians. But the unfortunate thing about that relationship was I really liked him. You know what I mean? And I think that for me is the kind of crux of it all, that the politics and the stuff is just so confusing and you don't know where you're at. But this trip, I must say, to Palestine, and you realise, spending time in Tel Aviv for the first time for 25 years, a couple of times at the end of last year, it's connected, exits. I think they've got more companies listed in Tel Aviv on NASDAQ than the rest of the world.
Yeah, something crazy.
Something crazy. And it is kind of self-perpetuating, and have been those exits. And it's a great, vibrant scene, and it's brilliant. And I think even the Israeli Defence Force as a great start-up kind of conduit and all that, amazing, great.
Yeah.
But then when you cross over into Ramallah, through the wall, this horrible kind of gash between those two countries, and then you realise that 8 years ago, Gaza and the West Bank, I think it was, I can't remember the name of the company, but 8 years ago, I think it's a Kuwaiti operator, one of the major operators there, spent 350 million or something like that on 2G and 3G licenses, and Gaza still doesn't have 2G, and Palestine or the West Bank has only got 2G. If you import hardware into Palestine, it has to go through an Israeli regulator. I mean, basically, the Israelis own the spectrum, they own the oxygen. As the Palestinian IT kind of minister told me a couple of weeks ago, and it just seems blatantly unfair. You know what I mean?
So is there a tech scene now?
There is, but it's very, very difficult.
Okay.
Again, when you're under those type of conditions, you hack and you do stuff, and there's, and the companies that I met there, it was about 30%. 30% was, it's impossible to do business. If I fly, even if I fly for a mine in Jordan, I still have to go through the Alembi Bridge. I still can only go through there, I think, between 9 and 5 during the week. It's shut at weekends. So they end up, spending time in Amman, But the 70% that were there, and it seems like they're there for the long haul, the bottom line was we're employing Palestinians. That's why we're here. We want to, change the perception of this country. Mm. And I think if there's anything, if that start-up scheme, I mean, there's VCs involved, there's a couple of interesting companies there. It's very nascent in comparison to Tel Aviv, obviously. But a lot of outsourcing comes from the Israeli arms of behemoths like Intel and Microsoft, and they outsource work to Palestine.
Okay.
This is the
coding work and things like that.
Yeah, because it's 50% cheaper than they're doing it with an Israeli company. These have got to be great things, and if this thing, and I think it's like the Israeli tech community and the Palestinian tech community, they don't really give a fig about politics. They just want to hack and they want to code and they want to do stuff. And so in that respect, hopefully, that might be some form of optimism for the most complicated place on the planet.